Good morning, everyone. This is Jennifer DeBroil with DRPT in Richmond. We're pleased today to bring you a webinar that's focused on electric propulsion transit and how we are working with our partners at DEQ and some of the transit agencies and Dominion and Virginia Clean Cities to advance the incorporation of that technology into Virginia's transit fleet. Today's webinar is, we think it's probably be less than an hour, but we're going to go through and give you some updates on guidance and talk about best practices. If you have questions as the webinar goes on, feel free to input them into the chat box, and we will have time for question and answer at the end. And now we're going to go ahead and get started. And I'm going to start off today and give you some updates from our merit program from an eligibility perspective and talk a little bit about our view as an agency on electric transit. So one of the things that we've talked a lot about here at DRPT over the past several years, even before things like the VW Mitigation Trust became apparent, is trying to talk about the environmental benefits of transit and how basically the core of what we do is intended to make our environment better. It's intended to help us confront some environmental challenges by reducing vehicle miles traveled, reduce pollution, and also, users of public transit see a savings financially from going in a transit vehicle instead of a single occupant vehicle. So that's a core part of the business that we do here at DRPT. In terms of Virginia-specific measures, transit takes about almost 1.4 billion passenger miles off of Virginia roadways, results in 19 million gallons of fuel not burned, and reduces CO2 emissions. So transit in and of itself is environmentally friendly, but we want to look towards how we can make a practice that's already environmentally conscious even more so. So some of the recent initiatives that we've been working on here at DRPT, that we'll talk about many of these today, are our electric bus state procurement. For the first time, we do have electric buses on our state contract. Neil's going to talk about that a little bit today. Our new merit capital prioritization program that went into effect last year has, in the major capital expansion parts of that program, some additional bonus points or additional credit for electric vehicles. And then, of course, we had the Volkswagen settlement in our partnership with DEQ that enabled us last year to fund a significant amount towards electric buses and adding the first electric buses to Virginia's transit fleet. Finally, we won't talk about this one much today, but we are partnering with HRT to be part of the Automated Bus Consortium that's being put together by AECOM. And with that consortium, the intent is to basically build the specifications for an automated electric transit vehicle by 2021. So when we start talking about state policy and funding policy for transit vehicles, whether they're replacement or expansion, one of the things that we wanted to look at was to get to the point where we could quantify the benefits of electric buses and compare them to to what we have historically funded, primarily diesel, and look at the cost effectiveness. So the graphic on the screen, this comes from a study that was released by Columbia University that looks at the lifetime cost of an electric bus versus a diesel bus. And I think, initially, and for some time here, our policy has been that we would, cover the cost of a vehicle at, a match rate that was equivalent to what a clean diesel replacement would be. So we didn't participate in that additional upfront capital cost historically. But now that there's more experience in the industry and there's more data available, we can start to see that the lifetime cost of an electric vehicle reducing the fuel cost significantly and reducing the maintenance cost as well. It's really showing that the technology is very efficient and cost effective. And so while the upfront cost may be more, we need to look at it from a lifetime perspective, and that cost effectiveness is something that we wanted to consider in reevaluating our eligibility and funding policies. So as I mentioned previously, prior to fiscal year 20, so prior to the current fiscal year, our participation in alternative propulsion vehicles was only up to the cost or the share of a cost of a clean diesel replacement. That was something that had been policy written and unwritten at DRPT for quite some time. We did have a number of agencies around the Commonwealth that experimented with different propulsion technologies. We participated in some of those that were done as larger scale pilots or conversions of fleets. One example is GRTC here in Richmond that runs a CNG fleet. But it was something that we really hadn't dipped our toe into, but we were talking about more and more. And so when the opportunity to partner with DEQ and leverage VW Mitigation Trust funding happened as we entered the grant cycle last year, it was really an opportunity for us to try some things that we hadn't previously, and to dive into the research a little more, learn more about the technology and the industry and where things were going. So that all being said, we're really excited that beginning in fiscal year 21, so this is for the grant cycle that's coming up, DRPT will consider requests for alternative propulsion vehicles, be they electric, hybrid, or natural gas, for funding on par with what we had previously funded only for clean diesel, based on several factors. So what we want to see is that agencies are really going through a thoughtful, clear planning process to make a decision about what they want to do going forward for fuel type and propulsion for their system. So that's the inclusion of alternative fuel vehicles in your transit development plan or your transit strategic plan, or that there's another planning process that has gone into the development of either a pilot or a decision to convert your fleet to a different fuel type. A key piece of that, and something that can't be left out, and Angela will speak to this when she talks about the VW trust and where we're going next with that, is when we look at these projects, we need to look at not just the vehicle, but the infrastructure alterations that are required to make that work. And so having a plan for that as well, and having a path forward to how you fund those alterations is going to be really important. That's something that we're going to look to see that you've already considered. And again, we're not looking to fund the purchase of one vehicle to see, I'm kind of everybody that knows me knows I'm kind of a transportation geek, and these are really neat vehicles. And so we don't want to have one-offs out there. We want to see agencies try these that have a clear intention of migrating a significant portion of their fleets to alternative fuels. So that's all written into our new guidance that's going to be coming out in the next week or so in draft form for you to have an opportunity to comment. Angela is going to speak to how we're going to be able to continue to leverage that mitigation trust funding going forward. So that for FY21 will be kind of playing our funding and VW funding, working with DEQ together. But once that opportunity leaves us behind, we want you to know that DRPT's commitment to funding electric vehicles remains in place. And so that would be at a 68% match rate. So that is a significant change from our past practice. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Angela, and she's going to talk to you about where we are from a process perspective with the VW.
All right, great. Good morning, everyone. Before I dive in, I just want to say a couple things about there couldn't have been a better outcome with our partnership with DRPT. I mean, I just have to say that when you have a limited amount of dollars to spend, This is a one-time event in terms of funding from the trust, and so you couldn't have had a better outcome where you're actually making policy changes that will enable electric transit buses to be funded out into the future. And so I just have to say that, we are going to talk about this as much as possible out in public, that this is the best expected outcome that anyone could hope for in terms of agencies working together, and to think strategically out into the future how we're going to continue to do this is just, I just think it's fantastic. And so I would really like to thank our partners at DRPT, because they're phenomenal partners, and they are doing the heavy lifting here, and it's just been fantastic. So where we are in the next round of funding, so we funded in the round of FY20 approximately $9 million of the $14 million that we allocated for electric transit buses was awarded, and so that leaves us with approximately $5 million going into the FY21 grant cycle. We are looking at making a few tweaks, not many. So the only thing that we may be looking at potentially are setting some different cap levels based on bus sizes. We are not sure. We're probably going to do more clarification and simplification of what we did last year, because what we did worked really well. So we don't want to make a bunch of changes when they're not necessary. So I think that the only thing that folks may be seeing is our different cap levels for different sizes of buses, and potentially some clarification. When it comes to the charging and installation, we did get a late call from our Attorney General's office during the grant process that we could actually use the money for installation as well as the capital cost of the charger. So we actually did fund the installation of chargers in FY20. In some cases, we did that if we felt that was something that needed to be funded on the Volkswagen side. DRPT is stepping in and taking a look at that, and we're going to work together on some of the criteria changes that are going into place in the FY21 cycle in the program. And so those are some of the things that we talked about, and we made sure that agencies were looking at in the 20 grant cycle, FY20 grant cycle, in terms of we wanted to make sure that agencies understood that there would be the need to modify your facility for the charging side of the electric buses. So now that's going to even be more important as we move forward when we're looking at that, so folks understand what that means in terms of their facility side of things. One of the things that we would really like to have moving forward is some input from all the transit agencies in terms of eligibility. Right now we are looking at, we funded 35, 40-foot, and 60-foot transit buses. So outside of that, is there really a need to fund transit buses that are less than 35 foot? So we'd like to get some input on that. We'd also like to know if you're planning to submit for an application for electric transit buses in the 2021 grant cycle. And if you are, what are you submitting for? How many buses? What is your estimated total ask for VW dollars? And then, so again, a lot of the decisions, the policy decisions that DRPT have already made are making some of the questions around the sustainability of funding sources less pertinent this time. But again, we would like to have your input on both of those, and the thinking of the transit agencies beyond 2021 in terms of transitioning your fleets to all electric. And that's all I have today.
Thanks, Angela.
Yep.
Next up, we have to talk a little bit about the state contract, what's out there for you to use.
So, yes, good morning. So, DRBT worked with the Department of General Services to put for a state contract on their EVA system, 12-year buses with 500,000 miles, meeting the FTA requirements. And so we do have 4 manufacturers that we approved, as you see on the screen, and the Gillick with a variety of buses. Gillick was a 30, 35, 40, New Flyer is 30, 35, and 60. Nova was a 40 electric bus, and then Proterra was a 35 and 40. Also on the contracts, with the pricing of these buses will be some pricing of their options that many of you have, but you would work with those manufacturers on that. Also is included the charging equipment, the chargers and the charging equipment, and it's very important to download if you're doing this for the first time, it's the research of how the charging process is different per manufacturer. And as we've seen, most of these manufacturers, if you're interested, will probably bring a demo to your property. Some of them have actually done some temporarily seeing them in service. So we would really encourage that. And also, we have included on this all the FTA clauses and certifications, the bus testing, and everything is there for you to download, to do your work to see how it meets the FTA requirements. So if you have any questions, you certainly can contact me. But as we've seen, there's been a lot of traffic on this site. Just to make you aware that other states are using this contract also. So. But please take the time to contact any of these manufacturers. They're certainly been in Virginia to do a lot of demos. So thank you.
All right, thanks, Neil. And now we're going to call on Josh Baker. Josh is the CEO up at Dash in Alexandria, and they've done a lot of work in the preparation and planning for taking their entire fleet to electric. So, Josh?
Yeah, good morning. Thank you for having me on here, Jennifer and everyone at DRPT. As you mentioned, I'm Josh Baker. I'm the general manager here at Dash. And I'll just jump right into on the next slide to talk a little bit about our organization for anyone who's not familiar with us and our operating environment. We are a nonprofit public service corporation in the city of Alexandria. Got 13 routes, about 100 buses, and we operate the King Street Trolley. We have just shy of 4 million riders annually and do about 2 million passenger miles a year, and we make the connections with all of the regional transit services here in the urban area. I pause for a minute to say the organizational kind of characteristics of Dash are important, and I point that out as it relates to our project with electric buses and implementation of them, because our service is very urban and very conducive to it. So I'll talk about that more in a minute. But we're primarily a feeder service into Metro Rail for commuters going in and out of the district and to other areas in Northern Virginia. We do provide some direct connections as well. So we stay pretty busy within a relatively small footprint here because the city is pretty compact. So from an environmental standpoint, the city of Alexandria has long been very committed to focusing on the environment. We do sit within a non-attainment area, so pollution is a big problem here, particularly in the summer months. And so we're really an area that is focusing on trying to figure out how to deal with a lot of those impacts that are being felt by the environment. As I mentioned before, the urban environment, we experience a lot of congestion, a lot of slow speed service, lots of idling. This is particularly troublesome because a diesel bus just really puts out a lot of pollution while at idle, and there are a lot of issues with the emissions systems and the impact of that low temperature, low speed service. And many people on this webinar who provide transportation services will be very familiar with this problem. Some of our buses don't see more than 20 miles an hour, throughout an entire day of service, which is tricky, but it does bode well for electrics. So again, as I mentioned, we established the first environmental charter in the Commonwealth in 2008. The City Council has appointed a Environmental Policy Commission, or EPC, that recommends them to annually consider recommendations in the Environmental Action Plan. So there's real buy-in kind of at a leadership level within the city. And that buy-in, those plans really speak to implementing and trying to find ways to invest in low and no emission vehicles from a priority standpoint. So, and then the last thing here on the slide is our residents. It's a unique environment. It is a very wealthy community outside of DC. It is a very engaged community. It's sort of a set of people that is really wants to see us investing and taking the lead and helping to set things moving forward for the rest of the Commonwealth, recognizing the challenges that other areas may have from a technology standpoint. If we can get them going here and try them out and be able to learn from that and share our experience, we see that as a positive investment for the entire state. So moving on to approaches here, one thing I would mention this first bullet is we talked a lot with our EPC, the board of directors for DASH, because we do have a 9-member board of directors. We are not governed directly by City Council, which is a setup that is similar to elsewhere in Virginia, Lynchburg, Roanoke, Richmond, and so forth. So we have a lot of parties that we have to talk with about what we're doing. And one of the things that kind of really kicked this forward was the issues surrounding the performance of diesel buses, and more specifically hybrid diesel buses, which we have over 65% of our fleet is hybrid electrics. And anyone who has operated those buses know they are very problematic, and they really don't accomplish the goals that we have from an environmental standpoint, and they just add to operating costs and long-term maintenance costs. So we had to have these discussions, and they had to understand why we were wanting to go the direction we did, and that took the better part of 9 months. So it was not a short process to get that going. But I just emphasize that for anyone considering to do this, you need to start your conversations as early as possible and be prepared to have a lot of them with a lot of different entities within the community. So we spent some time visiting the manufacturers, getting information, learning about their approaches and their products. Anniston, Alabama is where New Flyer has their VIC, which is an electric educational center. Greenville, South Carolina, where Proterra is. San Francisco, Proterra is out there in the LA area as well. So we spent some time talking with them. We identified some local funding to help us to understand the impacts and what we needed to do to move forward with this, and we engaged CTE. And the reason we engaged them is to understand what the infrastructure requirements, because we're not just talking about a couple of buses in a fleet. We're talking about a bus fleet of over 100 vehicles that we have an ultimate goal to transition over to. So what are the impacts from a service standpoint, and how do we make sure that our facility is capable and ready for doing that? As mentioned before, I think Neil mentioned it and Jennifer may have as well, is that you can get these manufacturers to provide a real life demonstration, to bring a demo unit. They bring along a generator to charge it. sort of an interesting setup, but they bring a truck with a generator and the bus on it. And then we ran buses from both New Flyer and Proterra for the better part of a week or more to gather information from the buses. And both manufacturers were able to provide us with a lot of telemetric performance data about the buses that we could look at and understand their capabilities. Interestingly enough, both of them were lower capacity battery buses, older models. So that was helpful for us to really see the limitations of the older technology. And the last two items here, we've attended all the ZEB conferences. That is something that's going on now annually out in California to understand what's going on with the electric bus industry. And then, of course, we've looked for peers. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing here for us. We spent some time. DC Circulator has a large fleet. I believe it's 12 or 14 Proterra buses that they're currently operating in the district. And that's been out there for the better part of a year now. And so we were able to spend some time talking with them about those. On the fleet side, from the standpoint of our plan, we are currently, they are on order at this point, 6 electric buses, which we expect to have delivered by this time next year. And this was something that was a tricky thing for us, you know, setting out into this environment. How do we make the decision in a way that ensures long-term success and makes sure that we're successful in the implementation? So we actually split our order between 2 manufacturers and as well as the chargers. And one of the things that we're wanting to explore with this is not only how the vehicles perform. You know, a sales pitch is a sales pitch, but we want to understand what's real life and how does it operate and how does it do in Alexandria. But also the compatibility between the different manufacturers. You know, there is a standard that's been established with plugins, but you know, many of the manufacturers fall short of guaranteeing that their bus will charge on someone else's charger. And so we've pushed really hard to say we're going to find out whether that's true, and we want to know, because we're committed to long-term going forward, what we, you know, how's this going to work? We don't want to end up with 6 buses from the exact same manufacturer that turn out not to work, and then we have to reverse course and go a different direction. So that was our strategy, was splitting our order. We do have in our TDP and our CIP, which is our capital improvement plan, commitments in writing to a gradual transition to ZEBs for replacement and expansion buses starting in 2020 all the way through 2027. So our goal is that by 2027, we will not purchase any diesel or hybrid buses. We will be 100% electric. It's a bit ambitious, but it's a commitment we wanted to make because we feel very strongly we've got to make sure we're moving forward. Again, the support of the board of directors in backing that plan, as well as other entities within the community, and then always watching for all available unique and alternative methods for funding capital projects. We've had to kind of do a little bit of a hodgepodge, which I'll talk about in just a minute, of funding mechanisms to get this moving forward. But you know, you really need to be considering all of the different ways that you can accomplish this. It's not necessarily going to be all coming from one place, and that's definitely been our experience here in Alexandria. And then the last bullet here, we are embarking on a ATV, or Alexandria Transit Vision Plan. We actually just released our draft network design yesterday. This is similar to projects such as in Houston and Richmond, where our network is being reimagined. You know, Dash has fundamentally been the same for the past 30 plus years. And we're experiencing ridership declines as everybody else is, and we're having to rethink what are we and how are we beneficial to our community in this environment when you have so many other sources of transportation options now available to commuters and others. So the reason that this is key is the ATV network redesign will have a role in helping us to understand what the maximum capacity we need of the vehicle from a service time frame or mileage standpoint is, and that is continuing to change as we speak. So we factor that into our discussions with CTE. From a funding standpoint, we did leverage existing capital funds and general funds, local general funds that were available to us to supplement with the VW funds. We also here have NVTA, which is our regional authority in determining funding of projects, and we secured some funding through them. I'll reference in a minute. But these are various sources that we deal with. We also, again, applied for the VW funds to get this moving forward. And we have been looking at opportunities with the Low-No program. I will say about Low-No that we, because of where we are, our federal funds are all used for WMATA. So DASH isn't currently a federal funding recipient. And so we've been debating the question of going after some of these other grants that are out there on the federal side, but that's a bigger lift for us. So we've been slower at looking at Low-No than some other areas may have been. And then the last bullet there at the end, we talk about smart scale. So as I mentioned, NVTA awards projects. So we have an NVTA project for facility expansion and buses and facility retrofit. We also have two projects, smart scale projects. One is our facility is exceeded capacity, so we don't have enough space right now. So one thing is to expand our bus capacity. And then the second project is to come along and incorporate the electric bus infrastructure and chargers. So that's what we did with the smart scale there. And then so for the future, some of the things that we're doing and thinking about and some takeaways that I wanted to just kind of give the participants something to think about. I'll start before I forget, to say that, these were things that we thought about here in Alexandria. They may not be applicable to all areas or all service types or modes, but these were things that we felt were important to point out. We sought the maximum battery capacity that's available today, and that's 400 kilowatt and higher. I think New Flyer has the highest battery capacity with Proterra, very close to them. We wanted to make sure that we got the most current up-to-date chargers. We're installing two different types of chargers. One is Proterra's own, brand charger that they supply with their buses, and then ABB is a charger supplier that New Flyer has partnered with. So we'll be installing both of those. We did discover that they both require slightly different infrastructure. They have different cost factors. It's a little tricky, so we're really interested to see whether both chargers can handle both different types of buses. And then we equip the buses with overhead charge rails. We do not have a plan right now for opportunity charging, which would be en route charging where a bus is stopped at a stop and a cantilever arm comes down to charge the bus, or even within the facility. That is possible within the facility, our expansion facility. But we're equipping the buses to be prepared for that, so that if we can do that, we can. We have the buses available to do it. This point, the fourth bullet point here, I think is important to understand. As of today, based off of our experience in operating the buses and what we're getting, if we were to go 100% electric tomorrow and replace every single bus we have in our fleet, with our current service profile, those buses could only sustain 74% of the current profile. So this is a challenge, right? I mean, this will probably change between now and 2027, but we've got to make sure we figure out how that's going to look, because we would not be able to operate and serve the service that we provide today if we were 100% electric. But the way things are changing, we're hopeful that will catch up by the time we get there. And then the last item here is, as a takeaway, is, we talk about, and there's funding for chargers and there's funding for the buses, but one of the other challenges here is the facility. Are the technicians capable of working on the buses? Are they trained? We're dealing with an issue right now. The Dash facility is about 10 years old, but lacks overhead infrastructure for working on the roof of buses. And that's just, it's just how it is. So we're having to go back and try to figure out how do we retrofit the facility to make it possible for the technicians to service vehicles with equipment on the roof. It's a problem for us currently with our hybrid buses. And then the bus operators, they have a role in this. How they drive, how they operate the vehicle. Our experience with the demos was that was a major factor in determining how long the bus could be out there, before it had to come back in for charging. So that's really all that I have to say. I just want to emphasize my email address is there. Anyone who's interested, anyone who wants to talk more about this, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, we want to do everything we can to help move this technology forward and be partners in this. And with our capacity to get it out there on the road, we hope to start seeing how this is working and what the challenges are as soon as possible. So if people are starting to think about projects related to this, I welcome you to reach out to me, and I'll make sure I connect you with my staff if I can't help answer your questions. So thanks for having me.
Thanks so much, Josh. We appreciate you taking the time to share the story of Alexandria and Dash's commitment to electric transit with us. So next up, this journey towards more electric vehicles in our fleet has led us to partner with a lot of different agencies and have some conversations about how we can work together and how we can partner to achieve our goals. And so our next presenter today is Alan Harned. He's with Virginia Clean Cities and is going to talk a little bit about different funding opportunities for clean transportation.
Well, thank you, Jennifer, and it was awesome to hear from Josh and his progress. I'm with Virginia Clean Cities, which was formed in 1996 in Hampton Roads as the Clean Cities Coalition. We're working with everybody statewide from our small team at James Madison University now on energy, economic, and environmental security efforts. And so Clean Cities stakeholder organizations include a lot of agencies as well as municipalities. Fleets in Virginia are members, so you might not know it, but I'm probably talking to many members. And so Virginia Clean Cities fleets have achieved kind of a lot of them layering into what Jennifer was talking about, but 33 million gallons of oil displacement annually and 174,000 tons of CO2, thanks to fleets transitioning, like what Josh was saying, to cleaner fuels, biodiesel, natural gas, propane, hybrids, and now electric. EV transit vehicles are available at a variety of sizes, and this is a really great opportunity to sort of toe in and explore this. And politically, gasoline and diesel is an expense in Virginia of $33 million a day, and practically no gasoline and diesel are produced in Virginia. And oil is the highest level of CO2, carbon dioxide pollution. So folks there's now deep buy-in from state and local governments to reducing our carbon footprints. As we hear about this, the scope of this problem is met with these funding opportunities. So while I'm closely aligned with the federal government and the U.S. Department of Energy, I'm looking at how Congress is appropriating lots of funding for these. And so, as Josh said, looking around and leveraging federal and local funding is a great opportunity. So I just say shop with these funding partnerships in mind. And as you're shopping, Josh mentioned that 74% of his fleet is available today, and he's looking for looking for what works. So don't focus on what doesn't work for electrification. See if there's something that does. So I've got two main slides on some funding opportunities, and the first is to really showcase and highlight the DRPT merit program, which does provide up to 96% of funding for electrification. We've talked about that today, but I do want to just showcase and talk about a few of these, and also to mention what Josh found funding for. Smart Scale could do up to 100% funding for bus electrifications, and so I would want to reiterate Josh's slides. I'm going to talk about mostly what we haven't otherwise discussed on this call, which is the low and no emission bus program for those who are federally funded, who have existing conduits, easy access to federal applications. There's this program that allows end of useful life replacements of diesel buses with electric. So you can begin your transition with 85% funding. Projects recently have not included any Virginia awards. So there's probably keen interest from the funders in supporting some awards into Virginia. So you have you may have an easier go than in the past. So this year there was no Virginia awards. Projects have ranged in recent awards from $750,000 to $3 million projects for buses, for depots like overnight chargers, for route chargers like what Josh was mentioning of the kind of the dwell opportunity chargers, for backup generators, and I would note there's all sorts of cool lithium ion. There's battery backup generators that are accessible now from the bus manufacturers, and for training for first responders. And so there may be some opportunities for training for staff like Josh was mentioning in the low-no bus program. It has been $85 million a year in this program, which represents a good opportunity to tow in. Next funding area is congestion mitigation and air quality funding. So there is 80% funding available. It's 80% federal available in those, and there has been successful applications for transit. So fleets that transitioned to CNG a few years back that had similar challenges in terms of higher upfront costs and needing infrastructure were able to use CMAQ, and you could certainly make the case for utilizing that for electric buses. You do need to get in line. Funds are available at your regional municipal level. So Richmond, Hampton Roads, and Northern Virginia, you'd go to your local planning district commission and you'd apply. And there's often an annual review process, but since transportation operates on a 6-year planning process, it may be a 6-year or a few years of a wait. The DOT Build program, which stands for Better Utilizing Investments to Leverage Development, is another source of opportunity for large transitions. So if you, like Dash, want to buy 6 vehicles or 10, get that 12 budgeted, the Build program is for large transportation projects, and an example would be Brazos Transit got $14 million out of a $17.5 million project, which was actually just a range of different things, including, I think, 3 buses. So that's 80% funding in that Build project. There's several other electric bus examples. And Miami-Dade got a $20 million project for transit facility electric chargers for the vehicles of their guests. So the DOT Build program, it used to be called the Tiger program, and it was renamed under this administration, and it's been funded at the federal level with $7 billion so far over 10 years of projects. On the next slide, there's also a few more less lucrative opportunities. Next slide. Which include the EPA's Diesel Emission Reduction Act. Federally, there are competitive grant funds that are normally 25% of a diesel vehicle replacement, so before the end of the useful life, and 25% for diesel or for alternative fuels. But for electric vehicles, this program is actually 45%. These are federal funds, so the other amount of funding would need to come in the form of cost share. But the EPA, DERA, there may be only about $9 million available nationwide, so it's a smaller pool of funding. For anybody that is operating a transit and pupil transit, there is a DEQ school bus program that the governor announced a few weeks back, which is actually $20 million in Virginia that will be available next spring for school buses, and actually providing the incremental cost, intended to provide the incremental cost up to 100% for the electrified school buses and infrastructure, as well as some assistance for propane school buses early 2020. And then there's a charger network also from DEQ that is a partnership with a firm called EVgo. And EVgo actually has some funding for municipalities for some 25 kilowatt DC fast chargers, which could be public access. And if a transit district is interested in towing in by just trying to make a bus-capable DC fast charger, that equipment could be a backup for school buses, or for transit buses, if you sort of spec the facility in a useful way. So just a note that there is some money for some DC fast chargers that municipalities or transit districts could control if you wanted for example, a 25 kilowatt DC fast charger that is offered, or even more robust equipment from the EVgo charger network. That's through the Virginia DEQ. And then the final piece is that the Department of Energy Clean Cities program does offer basically some deployment piloting programs. So if there's some cutting edge technology or something that is some of the autonomous or advanced technologies that you're interested in, that program, DOE Clean Cities, which is one where we get our branding from, has funding available 50% basically for innovative projects. Rural transit and autonomous and energy efficient mobility projects were all part of that last round, and we would be interested in working with any Virginia entity to get some of those resources into Virginia. So other funding is likely available. So the and think in terms of if 74% of the routes are capable, but there's a few that aren't, there may be some desires in your fleet to do some bus swaps. So you have 2 buses doing one route, or 8 buses servicing 7 routes, so that there's a chance for one to pop out and charge. So some transit districts are sort of overstocking. So all of this grant work is writing future fiction. It is responsive to budgets that you have approved or that you have desired for equipment that you want, or for work that you want to achieve. And the federal government, state government, and local collaborators such as planning districts are interested in helping close that gap. So if you can get to a yes, or even if you can get to 10 or 5 or 15% funding, there are additional resources to help. And so that 15% is certainly possible, with the fact that, back to the early slides that when Jennifer shared that Columbia University image, that electricity is very low cost as a motor fuel. So the base cost for consumers, for consumer like home electric vehicles, is about $1 per gallon. But transit fleets may have the ability to contract electricity at far lower costs than individuals. You may be able to get also be able to plan for some off-peak electricity, or from some grid cost shaving tools. And so, collaborating to get to 40 cents or to 20 cents a gallon equivalent of energy could provide deep savings over diesel. And of course, everybody who is aware of being behind some older buses, that the air quality implications of transitioning to cleaner vehicles is tens of thousands of dollars in health health benefits as well. So Virginia Clean Cities is very very happy to assist with analysis and that budget modeling, as well as to help write these grants if it would help. And I guess the final piece is that if we don't move as fast as state and local governments and federal governments would like, there may be some future low carbon fuel standards like there are in California, and so there may be an opportunity for transit fleets to get this further experience and should make these transitions occur while there's some deep funding to help. So there are some resources available, some web resources on the next slide, which is just the Department of Energy Clean Cities page and the Alternative Fuel Data Center, as well as the Virginia Clean Cities page. And I have those links included in a slide, in the next slide, as well as my contact information. And so I'd be real interested in partnering with Dominion or with DRPT or with with any fleet to assist you in making these clean transition. There are 100 green fleets operating like Dash is, and we'd love to work with everybody. So with that, I'll pass it back to Jennifer to introduce Kate.
Thanks, Alan. Last but not least in today's lineup is Kate Staples with Dominion Energy, and we've had had a great working relationship with Dominion over the last year or so, working on a number of different projects around the state. And so I will turn it over to Kate.
Thanks, Jennifer. Can you hear me, Jennifer?
We can hear you.
Okay, perfect. So if you want to go to our first slide. Thank you. I'm Kate Staples. I'm the manager of electrification at Dominion Energy. I've been working on electric transportation at Dominion for about 5 years, but the electrification team is new. It was developed this year, and it was developed because our customers' interest in electric transportation is growing, not just residential customers, but certainly our localities, our municipalities, and our commercial customers, both light duty, medium duty, and heavy duty. And we want to do everything we can to help with that transition. So we recognize that need, and we're developing our electric transportation team. And so when we want to support our customers, we've done had a lot of discussions with customers over the last year on what we can do to help support electrification. And so specifically in the area of transit, we want to help with education, but some of the other speakers on this call are definitely very well equipped to do that. So we try to make connections to those resources where possible. But we want to educate not just on the benefits of electric transit, but also on the opportunities that are out there. So we've had, like I said, we've had a great working relationship with a lot of the folks on this call, and it's helpful for us to know the opportunities that are out there so we can point our customers in those directions. For grant support, one of the things that we heard from some of our transit agencies and municipalities is that with some of the grants that they're applying for, they need to demonstrate support from their utility, and that can be as simple as a letter of support, but sometimes they need information about their site, some due diligence there, and we can help with that. So if you need a letter of support or if you need information for your grant application, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. If you need data or information about your site, if you could just give us a couple days instead of the day that the grant proposal would be due, that's usually a little bit helpful, but we can turn around a letter of support very quickly. For infrastructure, this is kind of our bailiwick. Infrastructure is one of the reasons we created the electrification team. We heard from our customers that the uncertainties about electrical and charging infrastructure was kind of their top concern with heavy duty electrification. And we can help there. We're not going to recommend a specific charger or anything like that. And I like what Josh said with Dash, where they were looking at different manufacturers as they were starting out. We always tell folks to think about it as if you're going to have work done at your house or at your facility. You want to get different quotes and look at different options. But we can help with questions about, what charging options are out there, what would work well for your use case, and what capacity is available. So we can certainly help it in that direction. I'm going to leave rebates till the end. I have a little bit of information on rebates. So I'm going to skip to rates for a second. So where I had said that infrastructure was the kind of top concern about uncertainties we had heard from customers, rates is a very close second. And they kind of go hand in hand. And I won't lie, electric rates are complicated. In Virginia, in other states, electric tariffs are complicated, but it's our job to help communicate that to you. And we can help you understand how charging these buses will impact, your current load profile, or whether it would be a different service, and you would want to look at what the electric rates would be for that service. So that's certainly something we can look at with you. And renewables, when I started in this role, the folks that were interested in electric transportation didn't really ask about renewables, and that's definitely on the other end of the spectrum now, where we're having the same conversations with the same folks about electrification opportunities and renewables. Both are great opportunities to reduce your carbon footprint. And so we have renewable programs for customers, and we have a lot of options for our commercial customers. And so that's something that we can sit down with you and review. If you want renewables to support all of your operations, or if you want renewables to support electrification, that's something we can certainly do. And rebates, I'll quickly touch on rebates. On September 30th, we filed our grid transformation plan in Virginia. It's a very comprehensive filing. It was uploaded to the Commission's website in 17 parts, so it's very long. But one of the things that we included is a smart charging infrastructure pilot program. And that pilot program is designed to help us get data to help us best integrate electrification into our grid in a prudent fashion. Because we know if we can use best practices to support managed charging and off-peak charging, utilizing data that's available to both customers and us, that we can help maximize the benefits of electrification, both from folks that own electric buses or vehicles or trucks, and for the Commonwealth as a whole. So there are some rebates in there for transit infrastructure, charging infrastructure, the electrical infrastructure, and for the charging station. We filed that on September 30th. We would hope to hear if that gets approved late first quarter next year. So I'll be communicating with the folks on this call once we hear about that. And if you go to the next slide, please. So for any of those items that we can help you with, education, grant support, rates, infrastructure, renewables, rebates, any of the R's, please contact us. Some of you have key account managers you work with frequently. Some of you work with your external or local affairs representative, and you're all welcome to contact the electrification team. My contact information is there. Please call us, let us know how we can help. And like I said, this team is new. So if there are things that we as a utility could do, let us know. If there's ways that we can help you, education, resources, let us know, and we'll work with the other folks that presented today to see if we can get those resources available to you. Thank you to Jennifer and her team for allowing us to participate. This was a really great webinar, and we hope to continue the conversation. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Kate. With that, we'll be happy to take some questions. So I have a few that are in our questions pod. The first one I will throw out to Neil, and this one's from Aiden Quirk out at Central Shenandoah. Are there price estimations for 35-foot bus? Neil, can you tell them where they can find that?
Yeah, that would be on the Department of General Services, Virginia Department of General Services, EVA website. There is, you can go to vehicles, I think is one of the things that's when you get to the EVA products, and you can punch, you'll go down to where you can find all of the manufacturers that I mentioned earlier, Gillick and New Flyer, Proterra, Nova, and then there's a price listing for each vendor, manufacturer, which is sort of the base price. And so the ones that have the 35 bus, they would be available there.
Okay. I'll throw this question to Josh about transit agencies that are looking at zero emission buses, are you also thinking about including electric vehicles in your non-revenue fleet? And do you see that as a way to help get acceptance for electric bus adoption?
Yeah, actually, that's a good question. We are looking at our support vehicle fleet. It was actually something we've talked about in the context of our facilities, infrastructure, and capabilities to accommodate it, and evaluating what funding mechanisms we have to get the chargers in place. There are currently electric vehicles on state contract. They're fairly easy to get. But of course, the difficulty for us is we don't have any chargers to plug them into. We are hopeful to factor that into, one of these other projects that involves improving and extending the facility. We also have some capital repair projects going on in the near future, and we're going to try to maybe fold them in under that and put that infrastructure there. But that is also a priority. So.
Thanks, Josh. We have a question from Lisa Guthrie about our other electricity providers in Virginia, like Appalachian Power, offering similar support for transit electrification. We can speak a little bit to that. Obviously the majority of the state, and particularly the urban parts of the state, are covered by Dominion, and so we've primarily been working with Dominion, but there is an electric transit project at Blacksburg Transit, and they are working with Appalachian Power on their project. I had a question about whether or not the webinar was being recorded. This is being recorded today, and we will post it on DRPT's Merit webpage with the rest of the materials related to applying for funding and some other online training and outreach materials that'll be coming up here in the next 6 weeks as we move towards the opening of our fiscal year 2021 grant cycle. With that, I think we're going to wrap this up. I appreciate everybody taking the time to join us today. I especially appreciate all of our speakers for taking the time to prepare materials and to join us and share information today. Like I said, all of the materials will be posted on our website, and the slide deck and agenda for today are also posted on GoToWebinar in the setup for today's webinar. So thank you, everybody, and have a great weekend.